We consider the moments in life that have had enough impact to help define a person we are today to be the most valuable advices anyone can share. And even more so when those are the words of the equine industry's most successful experts. Enjoy this captivating story by 2018 World Equestrian Games rider for Team USA Casey Deary as he recounts the life experiences that paved his way to success and how his dedication and faith overpowered his struggles and turned them into his defining moments.
Like I said earlier, I grew up in a little neighborhood. That neighborhood was out in the country. I can remember as a kid walking to the end of the cul-de-sac and the neighbor had a horse and I would take carrots down there and try to get him to come to the fence. And this is when I'm 6, 7, 8 years old. So I have my entire life, I've loved a horse. I can remember going to a Horsemen's for Christ camp that Doug Milholland did. And I think that's my earliest recollection of saying I'd like to be a horse trainer. I can remember I had a horse that I'd paid $1,000 for. She was appendix registered and she had ears the size of an envelope. And she, I'm sure because of me, wanted to be a racehorse. And here I am trying to make a reining horse out of her. So Doug was so gracious and he helped me during the clinic, and obviously there's a handful of other people in there, and so he'd say, I'll come back to you. And so I can remember Doug saying, why don't we work on this after the clinic? So Doug brought a lawn chair out, sat in the middle of the arena, and helped me for 2 hours. I don't know that we ever slowed down at all, but he helped me for 2 hours, and I can remember thinking, that's a guy that's there teaching a clinic for nothing, has had all the success in the world, and cares what I take home from that. Gave the extra time. And I can remember going, if I can do that for people, if I have the opportunity to give back, that's what sparked me. So when I graduated high school, the next morning I moved to Crum, Texas, and I worked for Clint Haverty for almost 3 years there. And Clint and Liz were wonderful to me. They're amazing people, but it is a lot of work. And it was a lot of hours. And I took night classes, working on my college degree there. And I just got burned out. I was mentally exhausted, physically exhausted. When I was 14 years old, I weighed 200 pounds. Lost my teeth and worked for Clint. I weighed 170. So I was completely exhausted. I was run down. And I can remember it was hot one summer, and I think, being there in that situation, not knowing the other end of it, I think I had one Christmas off the whole time I was there. Clint said to me, I think you need to go take a break. I think you need to go have a little vacation. And I'm thinking to myself, what am I going to do? I'm not going home. And so I was dating Nicole at the time, and her parents have a place about an hour from here, so 2.5 hours or so from Crum. And I went out there in the middle of nowhere, and when I let down, I let all the way down. I was exhausted, and it was so nice to go. I'd go days without seeing anybody, and there was no pressure, and there was just relaxed for the first time in 3 years. And I remember I went back to work, and I told Clint, I said, I think I need a longer break. And so he was great about it. And, we stayed long enough to get him taken care of. And I actually hired on at a ranch called the J. Bar Fletch. And I day worked under Lloyd Harper for 1.5 years. And I rode every day, but it had nothing to do with horse training. We worked cattle, we worked goats. I fed fish, I fed turkey. I checked fence lines. And I loved every minute of it. I'd go a whole week at a time without seeing anybody. They stationed me on 6,000 acres. I was the only person out there, and I'd see Nicole on the weekends and didn't have cell phones. And it was just a really, really great time for me to think and pray and try to figure out exactly what I needed to do. I mean, I had confidence in what I was able to do, and I knew what my end goal was, but I was so stressed and so burned out at that point that I just needed to unwind a little bit. And so after about a year and a half a day working there, I started taking some outside horses in. And just like everybody starting, they don't bring you Wimpy's Little Chick when you first open your gates. So I can remember a 5-year-old paint stud that was not halter broke, that they backed up to a round pen and unloaded, and it was my job to get him broke, and he'd never been touched. So I had horses like that, like anybody that would have started their business not having any sort of, Nicole says, without any trophies on the wall or buckles in a case. I got all those horses, and I took anything that they could get there to me, and I went and picked up some stuff. So I'd day work during the day, and I'd work those horses at night. And then in 2003-ish, the end of 2002 maybe, we actually moved to this ranch. I rented stalls here, and we lived in a camping trailer plugged into the well house. And we lived in the camper for a long time. Months and months and months, Nicole and I lived in that camper. The first year of marriage was certainly the toughest years that we had, and I was very fortunate. The guy that owned this place at the time was named Robbie Robertson, and we call him Papa Robbie, and he was our Dr. Phil. When we'd get in a fight, he'd pull us into the office and give us marriage counseling in the office and get us lined back out. And we must have been in that trailer for 8 months or so, maybe a year. And Nicole said to me one night, "If you don't get me a house, I'm going to kill you in your sleep." And she says she was joking. I was very scared. So we made that next step of buying a house. And so we leased this place for about 3 years. And when Wyatt was born, my first son, 2005, we bought this ranch and remodeled the house and had Wyatt all within 2 weeks. And that was a lot on my plate at one time. And it was always a situation where there was not enough money to cover any part of the bills that were coming in. And God provided every single time. And there were times where the payment would be due at the bank, and we're going, "It's due tomorrow," and there's enough money in the account to buy lunch. And she'd go to the mailbox, and a customer would have sent 5 or 6 months of training ahead of time and said, have me a credit. And it was never like, nobody ever asked if we needed it. We never asked anybody but it was just perfectly timed like that. And I'm adequate at speaking Spanish, so that was a big part of it. I'd go to Mexico about every other month and teach a clinic, and that would help pay the ranch payments. So we did everything we could do. I mean, I would trim horses at night on the side, and if they wanted a lesson on horsemanship or halter, it didn't matter. If you were willing to listen for an hour, I would certainly do everything I could do to teach you that. So it was a very, very rough beginning, and there was never a time where I could take a deep breath and go, "All right, we're good now." And I can remember 2005 was my first trip to the Open Finals. I showed a horse for Deb and Harry McCandless, and he was one that had been in a different program and just needed they'd done a great job training him, and he could do some huge things, but needed a little different approach. And so that horse was my first trip to the Open Finals. And then that fall, we made the Open 30 Finals on Cisco's Roan Ranger for Jason Wordsworth. And so I went from having a little momentum with a couple of horses for me to show and a large rookie and non-pro following. I won $90,000 that year, which put me 7th or 8th on the money earner list. And so I went from, at the time it was limited open, to only being eligible for the Open and not having anything quality enough for the Open. And at the time, you stayed out 3 years. So I went from 90,000 in 2005 to 2006, 7, and 8. I think I averaged $2,500 a year. And that was money that I won at Waco or this little horse show. It's just I did not have anything that was caliber enough for me to horse show. So then when I fell back into the intermediate, I had a few opportunities with some of the non-pro horses, and that kind of evolved, but it took forever. So I made the Open Finals in 2005 at the Reining Futurity, and my next trip to the Open Finals was 2012, and I made it on the 2 mares. I had Coolin Dungunner that ended up 14th or 15th place in the finals, and then America's Next Gun Model won it. So that was just my second year to make the finals. And from there, it really broke loose, and I got horses for me to show. And so now my business has transitioned to where I still have a very large non-pro group, but I have excellent help that does a really good job of handling a lot of that. So I try to make sure that each one of my assistants has a group of non-pros that they're in charge of, and we go to the horse shows, and I just try to oversee it. And I obviously step in if there's somewhere that I feel like I need the help, but they do a great job for the most part. So it's been a long trip, and it's been a lot of work, lots of sleepless nights, and it's just, but it's been an absolutely incredible journey. I mean, I love the fact that I get to be here when my kids come home from school. If I want to take them fishing, I can take them fishing, and I can make it up another day, and I get to, I tell my customers all the time, and I have a great bunch of customers, but there's no amount of pressure that a customer can put on me that's greater than what I put on myself, because I wake up every morning wanting to make the very most of what I have. And I think that's part of the reason that I can go to the horse show and be confident, is I've done absolutely everything I can do. I've had, my entire team has done their part, and I have worked as hard as I can possibly work. When I get to that horse show, what happens is going to happen. So I don't generally get overly nervous about competing, because I honestly feel like I've done everything I can possibly do to get ready and to get that horse ready. So, it's been an incredible journey. Just the fact that I get to do what I love. I mean, like we talked about earlier there, I absolutely love a horse. So to get up every day and do that, and I feel like this is what I've been called to do for whatever reason I was chosen to do that. That's always incredible to get to love what you do every day. But I can't necessarily say that I agree with the thing about if you do what you love, you don't actually work. Or how's that go? Don't work a day of your life. Because it's a lot of work. And anybody that tells you it's not a lot of work isn't trying hard enough to beat anybody.